Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for our webcasts with the artists Ahra Cho and Royal Sumikat. They are both featured in our current initiative at Asia Society Texas Artists on Site, which will be on view through this Sunday, the 24th. So I hope after tonight's webcast, you'll have a chance to come and visit with them in person in the galleries. We're also joined this evening by my co-moderator, Matt Manolo, who worked with us on this project as a nominator, and he'll be joining in later in the conversation. Artists on Site is a special project at Asia Society, and we're hopeful that you'll check our website for additional details on the artists and what they're working on, as well as their Instagram, where you can get more detail on their projects specifically. Briefly, tonight's structure will feature a presentation by Ahra and then a presentation by Royal. And then, as I mentioned, we'll jump into a conversation. When we also welcome you into that conversation, you'll be able to submit your questions via the chat through YouTube and Facebook. I will give a very brief bio for both artists and Matt, and you'll get their full details in the chat. Ahra Cho was born in 1990, and after study in Houston, the Netherlands, and New York, she received her BFA at the School of Visual Arts in New York and has established her practice in Houston. Royal, born in the Philippines and currently residing in Houston, works with spray paint, gouache, acrylic paints, markers, and most recently the app Procreate. Her work is informed by her experiences as an immigrant, community organizer, and priestess, and taking inspiration from the spaces afforded by these different identities. My co-moderator for the evening is Matt Manolo. Matt was one of the nominators that worked with us, as I mentioned. He is an artist and community organizer. He was born and raised in Manila, Philippines, and has called Houston home since 2004. He received his BFA in painting at the University of Houston. And in addition to his practice as an artist, he runs a community-based alternative art space called the A-Leaf Art House and founded the Filipinx Artists of Houston. With that, Ahra, we'll turn it over to you to begin sharing your presentation.
Hi, I'm Ahra. So living in America with this face means getting a bunch of questions like, where are you from? I was born in 1990 in South Korea. And my mom told me that I was a quick learner. She told me I picked up reading, writing, speaking faster than any other kids on my age. Or maybe she just wanted to believe that I was a genius. Well, obviously, I was not a genius, but it was true that I was a heavy reader because I was reading so much day and night. I ended up wearing glasses by the time I was 6 years old. And I even liked to read Korean dictionary and textbooks. I know, sounds turkey. And all the words and the stories that I was observing from my reading stirred my imagination and expanded my horizon. And it became something deeply rooted in me. Everything was fine until my parents decided to immigrate to United States. I was turning 14 years old when we just picked up and moved to Houston. And the minute I landed in the States, I became a speechless person. I felt like I could relate to the story of Little Mermaid at the time, the story about little girl who wanted to experience the bigger world and she had to pay with losing her voice. And soon after my arrival, I was even highly encouraged to change my name to Abby Cho. This was so that my name could be easily be pronounced by people who live here. And thank God I changed back to Ahra. It was a lot to process. And truth to be told, it wasn't all romantic. I felt like abandoned in the wilderness from the eating of the words that I had before. I was learning the English slowly, but as this was happening, I had a fear about losing control in the meaning of conversation. And on top of that, I was worried about everything sounding cliche and ugly as soon as I spoke or wrote it down with my poor words. I wanted to be much higher above than that. And I felt like my soul was locked in this tiny box. So I was looking for the door to walk out from the dark room that I was in. And this is how painting became another language for me. Well, when I was in college, art school, I tried many different media, such as sculpture, video art, installation, and photographs. But I came back to painting and found that maybe painting is the only way that I can make something poetic that was permanent. And it has become a bridge that connects me with the strangers. But I want to make sure that my work is not only about me being Korean or Korean American or even Asian, but it's about individual stories and the answers for the world, which continuously keep asking me, where am I from? And we all might have a different backgrounds, cultures, and languages here, but we're all human beings. We are seeking goodness, beauty, poetry, and the truth in our life. And I'd like to invite you guys to the place I found while I was searching for hope in my life. And I hope you guys discover yours too with your own time today. I want to start with the painting named Mother Language, which I generated after reading a movie script that my movie director friend wrote. It was a beautiful short story about a mother and her daughter. So I immersed myself in the story and saw myself deeply reflected in it. And I wrote a poem after reading this story, which I'm going to share with you guys. You can sight read. So this story and poem brought me to a long walk under a bluish dawn, and I came upon a golden meadow, flushed by sunlight under the drifting clouds. So I expanded in that moment to this painting with the drifting brush strokes that's coming from top to bottom. And the next painting I want to share is Travel. In this painting, I wanted to record a time that doesn't belong anywhere. It can be a warm shower, someone's hands on your forehead, waiting for the next train, or quiet time in the morning. It's like the extra time that remains, but no one can take it away from you. And it also makes your life worthy and dignified. People ask me how long I take for each painting a lot. And I always find this question hard to answer because living a life is also part of the painting. I'm not saying I live and die to paint, but I really believe that painting is not only about doing, but it's about being. It is so sensitive and spiritual, so I just can't let everything float over me. Sometimes I need to close my eyes and plug my ears to seek an intrinsic goodness. So it keeps me away from sleepwalking throughout the daily life. The next painting named Few Words. I started this painting with very abstract thoughts. I couldn't find the right words to describe my flowing emotions. So I was wandering around in front of the empty canvas, and I got nervous. I sometimes get butterflies in my stomach when I can start a new painting. I felt like I was trapped in these few words. So I wanted to find a way to release my anxiety at getting lost. So I inhaled, excelled and started by picking the colors. Firstly came to my mind, which were this faded grayish blue and black. And that was the little initial sparks that I just needed. I stayed in the moment, and slowly more colors, gestures, and composition reveal themselves to me. When I stand in front of the empty canvas, it reminds me of my limits. I need to embrace my limitation. How can I breathe life into this empty canvas? How can I make something more beautiful than this white canvas, which already looks perfect as it is? How can I be assured that I'm gonna get there? I'm not a god. I can do things only with my understanding, my knowledge. Sometimes, actually most of the times, I mess up my work. I wait to see what happens in the creative process. And waiting for the moment is also part of the work. I have to wait, see, paint, and move on, and paint again until I miss something beautiful in me. I want to end the story with the painting named A Solitary Conviction that I completed in 2020. Like everyone else, I stayed in my house most of the time last year. And to be honest, I kind of enjoyed for the first few months that I could be a little disconnected from this noisy world. But then it got longer and longer. And my loving grandma passed away in Korea at that time. And of course, I wasn't able to go to her funeral. And so many people are still dying today. I felt sad, angry, and hopeless. And I realized that all the disasters around the world, such as huge flooding in China, fires in Australia, the Amazon, California, locust plague in India, and the reason I couldn't go to my grandma's funeral, they're all connected, making each other worse and colliding together in the most unexpected way. So I came across with this simple question: what should I do? What can I do? As an artist, as an Asian woman, as a human. So I follow the shape of my confusing heart, and slowly some things surfaced in me, immersing through the thin mist that darkness is absence of light. Through the dark nights, we can be assured of the light that is coming. Through the dark nights, I could be longing for the warm light that was on my hand. And it reminded me how much I was following a phrase I pursued in my life, and how much I wanted this life so badly. Sometimes sorrow teaches you better than a laughter, because it guides you to the grace and a humble heart. I was tracing my senses and memories and looking for the source of light somewhere in my life. And a solitary conviction slowly surfaced in me. I was standing in the place where all confusions lost its power, because it was just as beautiful, just as our life is. When we meet something outstandingly beautiful, we are amazed, and we realize that it looks familiar. It looks as familiar as it does original. Because it was always in you and waiting for you to find it. My story will be answered tonight, and just as the East is far from the West, our distance might be vast. But I hope my painting and story brought you a little initial sparks for you tonight, and bring you some afterthoughts to your days, and help you to find your own poetry in your life. Thank you.
Thank you, Ara. I think that it gave us much more than even just initial sparks. That was excellent. Royal, if you'd like to begin, we'd love to pivot now to your presentation.
1 second. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Hi everybody. My name is. Let me remove this. I'm like, wait. Okay. My name is Royal Sumikat, and the name of my exhibit is Balikbayan, an altar to my family's migratory experience. During my time at Asia Society, I painted a mural on the wall and assembled an 8 by 8 foot box resembling a giant Balikbayan box. I want to start off with this mural titled Ancestral Giants. In numerous indigenous cultures, there's a myth that when our ancestors pass on, they come back as crocodile symbolism. So when we see them in our dreams, in our vicinity, in our books, etc., it's our ancestors reaching out to us. In this mural, my intention was to convey that we have the privilege from seeing from a higher vantage point because we sit on the shoulders of giants, which is our ancestors. We've inherited their knowledge, and without their resilience and will to survive, we wouldn't be here telling our own stories. So, which brings me to the Balikbayan Box. So this is a blown up version of what a Balikbayan box really is, which is a 3 by 3 foot in size care package filled with goods that the Filipino diaspora or migrant workers send back home to their loved ones, either as annual ritual or because they themselves can't afford to or have the time to go back to the Philippines. Balikbayan translates to return to motherland. So things that you would typically find in a Balikbayan box are new and used clothes, toys, canned goods, electronics, medicine, and chocolates, etc. And my intention with creating this installation is to reflect 3 themes, which is the Balikbayan box as the stand-in for brown bodies who can't physically be present in our motherland, the Balikbayan box as a Filipino love language, and the Balikbayan box as a symbol for imperial plunder. I say imperial plunder because from 1965 to 1986, US-backed dictator Ferdinand Marcos and his family looted the Philippines. Our country was still recovering from World War II during his dictatorship, so his actions and decisions destabilized the country. Crimes of desperation increased, government repressed activists and organizers, and the economy tanked. The economic crisis brought on by the dictatorship forced thousands of Filipinos to separate from their loved ones as they went on to become migrant workers so they could send money and necessities back to their families in the Philippines. So my father found himself in Saudi Arabia while my mom lived in the Philippines during the turmoil that the dictatorship brought. They lived apart for 14 years and only saw each other once or twice a year when he came home on leave. So in my installation, I've hung photos of my family throughout the years. My dad was out of the country. Some of these pictures are from the letters my parents sent each other back and forth. My dad showing what daily life looked like in Saudi Arabia, and my mom taking plenty of baby pictures so my dad could see how much we've grown while he was absent. The larger images are pictures I found on the internet. They're images of Ferdinand Marcos on the day that he declared martial law, and protests against the regime, and then people storming the palace. I've inserted these in between happy family photos because martial law was just looming right outside the door, despite the smiling pictures. And the fact that I grew up without feeling these harsh realities just shows how much my parents sacrificed to protect and provide for us. And then the way that my parents communicated with each other while my dad was away. Long distance calls were so expensive and inconvenient. So my parents sent letters and pictures, audio cassettes of voice recordings instead. So the recipient of the tape would pop it into a cassette player, and then you can hear them talk about the news, current events, and then just describing their daily life. So a part of my exhibit is a 10-minute video projected into the installation where some of the audio from those original tapes were extracted. The following videos are overlaid with audio from those cassette tapes. So I'm going to play one now.
Monster raw! Ano yung monster? Nakita mo doon?
Bahay kubo halaman doon ay sari-sari singkamas at talong sigarilyas at mani isaw, bata, tali, andol, katula, ubod at kalabasa at saka meron pa labamos mustasa.
Ano ba? Ano yung tinuro ka ni Mrs. sa'yo kanina? Ano yun?
Ano rin?
Hindi yung... Ano ba yun?
Ano?
Ako nahihirapan. Kaya lang, siyempre, minsan naiinip din sa trabaho dahil lagi lang nakaupo. Lagi lang kami nasa loob ng opisina. Pero ganun pa man, okay lang dahil hindi naman mahirap. Maganda rin ang takbo ng trabaho ngayon dahil maraming nagpapagawa ng mga building. Kaya paminsan-minsan nag-overtime din kami. Ito nga nakaraang May tsaka June, meron kami overtime ng 2 oras mula Sabado hanggang Miyerkules. Kaya 1 week meron kami 10 hours overtime, kaya 40 hours a month. Okay na rin dahil medyo magandang naiipon natin. Alam nga, nag-iipon tayo para sa kinabukasan natin. Para kung halimbawang titigil na ako sa Pilipinas, meron tayo naiipon. Kasi alam mo naman na napakahirap ng buhay dyan sa atin ngayon. Lalo na ngayon, mayroong economic crisis. Nababalitaan nga namin dito. Siguro, masyado na mataas ang mga bilihin dyan. Buti na lang, sinuwerte tayong kapag-trabaho rin sa Saudi. Kaya medyo okay lang.
What I wanted to reflect in extracting these audio snippets is the fact that unpacking this growing up, it just seemed like they were talking about the hardships in the Philippines. But now I realize how much martial law and the dictatorship informed their how they navigated the world and the way that they spoke into their tapes and even the things that I was singing growing up. But despite all of that, I feel like I never was without growing up as a child. But yeah, that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Royal. I think having all of that background context will hopefully really inspire people to come and see the installation in person, because it's a really transporting experience to be there with the Balikbayan Box at that scale, and also to see the mural. So it's my hope that everyone will have a chance, if they're in Houston, to come by this weekend and visit with you in person. Matt, it's such a pleasure to have you be a part of this conversation. And thank you again for joining us and for your role in this bigger project. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I want to give you the right to ask the first question. I'd love for you to lead off the conversation if you'd like, and just get us started in tonight's discussion, as we will also be taking questions from the audience. So if you're watching, please feel free to chime in through the chat boxes too.
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's having a good evening. Thank you for having me here, Bridget. So let's go. Let's go with the discussion. Okay, this is for Royal and Ahra, of course. Can you talk about the role nostalgia for the past might play in your work? And does your work help you transcend time or transport you to other times? Royal?
So nostalgia plays a huge part of it, because it's basically, I looked through a bunch of my parents' pictures, and I've been bugging my mom about those cassette tapes forever. And growing up, I used to play around with those cassette tapes. I've even accidentally overwritten a couple of them because I had like a recorder of my own growing up. And but now, as I'm older and unpacking this, the nostalgia is different now that I have a little bit more awareness about geopolitics and history. It's like, oh wow, this is completely different than what I imagined or thought it was growing up. Yeah.
For me, I go to Korea almost every year to visit my friends and family, and I lived in America more than half of my life already. And I lived in Amsterdam for 6 months and 3 months in Düsseldorf. So I really miss Amsterdam and Düsseldorf too. So I think my homeland is not rooting in one place. So I almost feel like I can bring it wherever I go. And that's where my family is, I guess. And I have my own family in Houston because I'm married to my husband. So nostalgia is almost like an illusion to me. So my work is not heading to the past or coming from the past, but it's more like dwelling in the present. So I can tell I reflect the nostalgia, illusion of the nostalgia through the present.
I've been thinking a lot about mentors and mentorship lately, and I'm a proud alumni of HISD. And when I was in middle school, I had an art teacher named Mr. McGinnis. And I've been thinking about a path that he sort of opened for me, a channel that would not have been opened if I hadn't had him as a teacher. And in Royal's installation with the mural and this idea of us standing upon the shoulders of ancestors, and if we can pull that forward also to mentors, I think that plays such an important role. And I wonder if you'd both be willing to talk a little bit about the importance of ancestors and or mentors, people who may be not related in your work. Royal, can you start us off?
I think it's incredibly important. I think that our modern culture today lacks a lot of storytelling and mentorship, because it seems like, Western culture is just mostly pop culture. And going back and unpacking the things, where prior to colonization, ancestral veneration was really big in the Philippines. And, I'm pretty sure it still is, but and I'm not so aware of it as much as anymore. I think that standing on the shoulders of giants, and having these mentors propel us forward. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We could just go back to what we learned, or what our ancestors have done, and then adjust or readjust. So they've done a lot of the hard work.
Ahra, what about you?
Well, yeah, there are so many artists and writers that I admire and get inspired by. And I can tell I read so many Korean literature, obviously. So, and there are so many great artists and writers in Korea. And as a painter, I love Charles Birchfield and William Blake. He's also writer and painter, and and also Agnes Martin. I can tell the way she sees the beauty in the mind. It's really inspiring, and the point that I can totally like relate to it.
Thank you.
I like the idea of not just, our blood ancestors, but artists who came before us, as ancestors in the same kind of like identity.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, what do you think?
I think this is very important, for us to think about as well. And, being an immigrant myself, I had to also look up to other artists who don't even look like me. And, and now I'm only discovering, all of these Filipino artists who I should have known, and this is just because of the Philippines not giving importance to art, education, and history and all that. So while we're in the topic of immigration, the role and impact of language as part of immigration is part of immigration experience. How does some of these experience manifest in your work? The whole, immigrant experience, and how this shift of learning and losing languages have impacted your process.
For me, I moved here very early, so right now that I'm like interested in unpacking a lot of like my story, as a immigrant and a Filipino, etc. The only living ancestors that I have are my parents. And so I feel like I'm kind of like trying to scramble, like, okay, I need to extract all these stories from my parents. It's so important. But also now that I don't, that Tagalog is not my main language, it feels like, there's this barrier. I can't really ask the right questions so they could articulate it well enough the way that I'm looking for. So I'm working on that. I'm still trying to figure that out. And I feel like that's one thing that'll affect my art practice when I start.
How about you, Ahra?
I think I use Korean language very privately. I write a journal, like poem in Korean, trying to analyze my think and mind in Korean, and kind of translate that to the painting, and playing with those ambiguity in life and lost in language. And yeah, and I don't know where am I going in the painting, but eventually I get there, like something beautiful place. And that's the pure joy or pure pleasure of being painter, I guess. And I think I use and strength my English with motivation. And it can be very political sometimes. It's like shouting to the wall that I am here, I exist, Asian woman artists in America. We are here. Yeah, those kind of motivation. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you say that your environment dictates your art practice? And how do
Yeah,
you express that in your work?
definitely. Well, when I was in Korea, everyone was Korean or Asian except very few. So I didn't have to question myself because I was being accepted by people just the way I was until 14. And so I didn't have to justify myself to make others feel comfortable or feel safer. But after I moved to the States, everything was changed and I had to leave all my privilege that I had before in Korea, of course. And it might sound weird, but I think I was lucky to be experienced living as a minority, as an immigrant, especially as a woman, because it just totally changed how I see the world. Like, for example, I learned that it's not fair to see someone as a race or country instead of their names. And that's what racism, tribalism, and nationalism does to us, you know? It shrinks our mind and heart and thoughts. So through the living in America, I learned justice from injustice, kindness from unkindness, and it made me very sensitive about what's happening around me. And I think that's very essential thing, like essential thing that all the artists has required for it. Mm-hmm.
Royal?
Could you repeat the question?
Oh, well, would you say that your environment dictates your art practice?
Yeah.
And
Very
and how do you
much.
express that?
So I feel like a lot of the things that I've been doing, like all last year with the pandemic and a lot of the injustices coming to head, like, you know, police brutality back to back, and then the anti-terror law in the Philippines. It was just like a lot of things happening all at the same time that are somehow connected, even though none of the conspirators know each other and they're all happening in different countries. So I didn't really, so a lot of the art that I make is mostly like representation of like my mythologies, but this installation I wanted to portray, like, it was kind of like I didn't really do much art during the quarantine, and then it was like, boom, this is what happened. These are all of my experiences that I felt and experienced and unpacked during the quarantine. So here's a giant box about it. So that's how, my environment is definitely dictated, or my art practice is dictated by my environment.
For Royal, you had mentioned that this is your first time working on an installation. Is this something that you will be making more in the future, or how do you see your future work beyond the Balikbayan Box?
I see a lot of I do see this changing the trajectory of my art practice. I know that I'm still going to be painting and making murals, but rearranging items and creating installations that express like an intention to me that I can't fully express in a painting is definitely something that I want to pursue. Whenever I have something in my mind, and with painting or murals, I'm limited by my ability to portray that with my the way I paint. Like, maybe I want something so complicated I can't paint it yet, but I can express that by arranging items together, collecting, putting things with intention, and then like explaining it. Yep.
I'm going to also just incorporate questions from the audience because we're getting some good ones. And this is a question for both of you from Alexandra. Both of you have talked about your parents' belief in you and your future and what they were willing to invest. And if you're okay sharing this, she says, Can you talk about what kinds of conversations do your parents share now about how their influence is being shared with the public on your art? So their influence on you, your art, and now that's becoming part of a public conversation. Are there experiences about that you'd be willing to share with us? Royal, can we start with you?
Yeah. So my parents came to see my exhibit, and they did share a lot. And that's also now part of the exhibit is me telling the story of what my mom told me when she saw my exhibit. So it's like meta. My parents are like people of very little words. I feel like if they express how proud they are of me in my art practice, that they're scared that I'll just like up and quit my job and become an artist, and like, you know, that's like their biggest fear. So, oh, sorry. So when my mom came to see my exhibit, she saw a video of her where her audio was extracted, and then so she told me a story from what she heard, and that was outside of the tape. So I think that now that my mom knows what I'm doing, I feel like they're interested in telling more of their story through me.
Ahra, what about you?
My parents, they're living in Korea, and they don't know about much about art world, so they kind of don't get what's going on. Like they're like, why do they pay for you? Like they don't get the point. They just see me like unemployed, like someone having a good life. Yeah, so they don't get it, but they're like happy for me, and like they're supportive. And yeah, but because of my parents, I didn't lose my identity as Korean living in America, because they want me to speak Korean, like eating Korean food, like, and reading Korean books, even though I'm living in America. So that was one of the biggest, like, rooted in me. Like my parents helped me to like not losing my identity, and they're the reason that I wasn't confused so much, because without them I wouldn't be like able to live this happy life, even though in this, like, you know, I face to injustice world every day, and I get all the like stereotypes and racism things I'm the one like face to, you know, those kind of world. But still, I was very proud of being Korean and Korean American, and that my parents, their like warm heart and love and those serving, helped me went through all this disasters in here, I guess. So that's totally like the biggest part of my life. I don't know how I translate to the painting, but it's definitely in me.
Well, Ara, you use a lot of colors in your work,
Mm-hmm.
and you express your emotions with the colors, you know, through your painting. Have you ever thought about making a black and white or gray piece, and what would it mean if you did so?
That's a cruel question. there's so many beautiful colors in the world, and why do I have to limit myself to like gray and black world? Well, yeah, I don't think so. If that's gonna happen, maybe it will happen naturally, but not yet. Well, when somebody asks me, which one is your favorite colors? I will say, oh, recently I like the lemon colors with the purple, or green color with some red orange. You know, there's so many different colors and stories behind of the colors. So I think I would like move on to just black and white painting. Yeah, that's cruel.
We have another question from the audience. It's a question from Caitlin, and she's asking how has interacting with one another at Asia Society, so the two of you, but also Laura Dre and Brandon Taw Harris, how has that impacted the work you've made in the space, or how do you think it might in creating work moving forward? Royal, can we start with you?
I was I was blown away. It was very it felt very magical because everybody didn't I had no idea about Brandon or Laura or Ara. I've never met them before, but then we all shared the same space together, and it was like our stories are all very much similar. And then there's a lot of similar you know, subtleties and nuances in each piece that was tying all of it together, and it just really solidified that we're all connected and our stories are all connected, spiritually and geopolitically, and just in all aspects, good and bad. And it made the world very small for me. It's we have more similarities than differences.
Right. Yeah, it was just pure joy and inspiration to see all the very talented artists and their life, their history behind of the work. It was just, I was very grateful about it, and the space was beautiful, and they let me to use the fourth studios, which allows little sunlight, and I was very inspiring by the space and the beautiful atmosphere of it. I definitely like to paint a lot, but it was just eye-opening time for me, and also it was kind of big challenge for me that I have to share my story with the public, and I have to do it I have to deliver in a good way, pretty beautiful way. I have to do it. So it was because I don't have much experience with that, so it was big lesson, and I had to even this artist talk too. While I was working on this, I think I definitely grew up through all the practice here. Mm.
Yeah, that was one thing Matt and I know we talked about, is this idea of the solitary versus the communal nature of a practice. And, painting can be one of the most solitary things that you do, but
Yeah,
there are also communal aspects. So if you could talk about that a little bit, maybe more in detail.
well, yeah.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, well, because like I mentioned, I love to paint alone because it needs a lot of focus, but at the same time, I have to make a conversation through the painting, and that was the part that I was missing from my life because I was very isolated, and I didn't study in Houston. I didn't go to college in Houston, so I didn't have much artist friends in Houston. So like Royal said, it was very inspiring, and I was surprised that there are so many artists and Asian artists, immigrants artists here, and it was really fascinating to see and invite them to my life and being invited to their life.
For me, I feel like sharing a communal space for art, and I've had I've had a studio before where I also shared communally, and I still do with others, but I don't use it as much. I see that like I'm subconsciously inspired. Like I'll make something, and then and it was inspired by something that like a studio mate was painting, and I didn't realize that. It was kind of like it was like a brain suggestion, and then they're like, oh, that looks like this, and it's like, oh, that's where I got it from, and I don't even realize it.
Mm.
And so and right now I'm never really solitary because my husband is an artist, so we're always like, our ideas are always bouncing back and forth. But working in isolation, I don't know. I haven't done that in a long time. I think that I like working in a communal space more just because other people can provide input. And whereas if you work solitary, they can't provide the input until the work is complete.
Matt, what do you think?
You know, I usually also work solitarily, but since the pandemic, you know, having like the kids run around the studio as well, you know, it's different. It's completely different. But then I also, when I was in school, we were working in a communal art studio, and everyone would just hop in and visit, and you know, take some snacks or whatever. Would you say, Royal and Ara, that because of this experience with Asia Society, would you say that, like for Ara, would you be looking forward into more activities where you're making art communally, or with Royal, would you possibly think about like what kind of works will you be creating if you did work solitarily?
I'll let Ara answer that first.
I don't know. And I really don't know because this pandemic made us so much distance between each other. So I don't know how it's going to be turns out, but I definitely want to have some like group exhibition with other artists and maybe a collaboration with other artists who's in different medias. It will be really interesting because I've been working alone for a long time. And it will be really nice. I want to send that invitation for everyone.
How about you, Royal?
I think if I were to work fully solitary, a lot of it would be like doing research work into putting more stories in physical format. So my mom still has a bunch of cassette tapes. I'd like to actually digitize and listen to them, and then maybe create an installation based off of one cassette tape and the things that she said there. And then another installation could be my dad's response to that, and how can I reflect that in the installation. So I think research work for future storytelling installations would be best for solitary.
One of the big picture questions that we were all talking about before was the challenges of just doing studio projects during the pandemic, and you've each touched on it in certain aspects of your responses tonight. But it goes along with a question that we have from the audience. It's a question from Joy. She's asking, what was the biggest challenge of this experience? So maybe big picture, pandemic, microcosm, Asia Society projects, but if you can talk a little bit about how you face the challenges too.
Okay. Hey, Joy. Thanks for dropping it in. For me, the biggest challenge, well, the pandemic, yes, it's very challenging. But like I'm only one person, right? So I had to build this box. Well, I didn't build it. Somebody helped me. But organizing that, and then Asian society was opened only on the weekends. So that also provided a challenge. But also, I'm provided with this really large space, but very little time and resources. So like I have this grand idea that hopefully someday with enough time when things are back to normal, I can expand on something, a space that large and make it the whole place like an altar.
Well, I think my life wasn't really changed through the pandemic, but before pandemic, I felt like I had to spend time with the people. So it was kind of hard to keep up my routine as a painter because, like I said before, people see me as, oh, you're having a good life with some expensive hobby. Because it's not a 9 to 6 job, and I don't make money like regularly in this capitalism world. So, but after pandemic happened, I had a good excuse to be isolated. So I had enough, like plenty of time to think and write and paint. And yeah, I learned that I have to paint every single day, like no matter what, even though no one's asking for it. Like no one's paying for it, I still have to paint and do it as a type of honor. And that's made it like almost routine and lifestyle to me through this pandemic. So I think that was the biggest change in a good way.
Well, I think I can't believe that the hour is already up because I could talk to y'all for hours about this, but I just want to say a very special thank you to both of you, Ahra and Royal, and also Matt. Thank you so much for being a part of this project and giving us good advice all along the way. It's been a treat to be with the three of you this evening, so thank you again. Please come by the galleries and see what they've been working on in person. Tomorrow through Sunday, you'll be able to access the work. And again, thank you to everyone in the audience for making time to be with us this evening. And we hope that you'll consider joining us in a more deeply engaged way as a member. And programs like this are not possible without our generous donors. So I'd like to thank them now. The presenting sponsors, of course, are Nancy C. Allen and Leslie and Brad Bucher. Major support comes from Chin Hee Jun and Eddie Allen and Mary Lawrence Porter, as well as the Brown Foundation, the Hearst Foundation, the Houston Endowment, and the City of Houston through the Houston Arts Alliance. Generous funding is also provided by the Anchorage Foundation of Texas, the Clayton Fund, the Texas Commission on the Arts, National Endowment for the Arts, Wortham Foundation, Olive Jenny, Ann Wales, Agnes Sutong, and also Oscar Tang. United Airlines is our official airline partner, and funding is also provided through contributions for our exhibition patron circle. And none of these types of programs are possible without the wonderful contributions of my colleagues. So a special thank you to Chris Dunn, Liz Nguyen, and Alana Rubin, who are behind the scenes, but are integral to the success of reaching out to you virtually. So thank you again for being with us. Thank you to the artists. Thank you, Matt. And join us again for future programs. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.